Tens of thousands of people die in BC each year, but since 1991, the number of those deaths that receive autopsies has gotten smaller and smaller. In fact, the province is lagging behind most other jurisdictions in Canada when it comes to its autopsy rate. So what's the impact? Well, it starts with families who have lost loved ones. We went to Port Coquitlam to meet with the father of a teen who died of a suspected overdose nearly 2 years ago, but she never received an autopsy.
Go lucky, carefree, bit of issues, a little troublemaker as a teenage girl, but your typical teenage girl.
This park is where Greg Sword would take his daughter Camila to play when she was a kid. But as she got older, it took on a different meaning.
This is where her and her friends would come down, and this is where they would usually get their drugs.
On August 20th, 2022, Sword says his daughter came here and bought dilly, a street term for the prescription opioid hydromorphone. The next day, Camila was found dead in her bedroom.
My mom actually found her body at 8 o'clock in the morning. She was curled up in a fetal position. And then when I got there, the cops were there, and they would not allow me to see my daughter until she was in a body bag.
It took nearly a year and a half before the BC Coroner's Service released its findings. A toxicology report found cocaine, hydromorphone, and MDMA in the teen's blood. The coroner concluded she died of cardiac arrhythmia caused by cocaine and MDMA use, but no autopsy was ever performed. Sword still wonders if dilly played a role in her death.
And I assumed that they were going to do an autopsy, but they didn't.
We ran Camila Sword's toxicology and coroner's reports by a number of independent death investigators who all said the same thing. Without an autopsy, it's hard to say with any degree of certainty what killed her.
Certainly in the context of a 14-year-old girl, we need to be sure what the cause of death is. Not just a best guess. We need to be pretty darn certain.
Forensic pathologist Matthew Ord says investigators could be missing out on critical health information related to the teen's death.
To me, the cause of Camila Sword's death is undetermined. It could be explained by drug toxicity, but there may be other factors at play that haven't been assessed by virtue of the lack of an autopsy.
Camila's case is far from unique. The vast majority of overdose deaths in BC don't receive autopsies, and forensic pathologists, the people qualified to perform them, say that's a big problem. BC's autopsy rate has steadily declined since the early 90s, dropping from 22% in 1991 to just 3.2% in 2022. That trails behind all provinces with more than 1 million residents other than Quebec.
The low autopsy rate it's a scandal. It means that we are unable to identify how and why it is our loved ones have died. As a society, we all need to know why people die. It's an important societal safeguard. We need death data to work out why people died so we can channel funding in the correct routes and so on. It acts as an early warning system for new disease processes such as COVID-19, or it can help identify new potent illicit drugs that come onto the market, and it can also pick up safety issues.
In a statement, the BC Coroner's Service said the main reason the autopsy rate is so low is because the number of unregulated drug deaths is much higher in BC than most other provinces. Instead, coroners will rely on information like toxicology, the scene, and the deceased's medical history. But that still doesn't account for how few autopsies are actually done here, especially compared to provinces like Alberta. In 2022, Alberta completed about 2,000 more autopsies than BC did, despite having far fewer total deaths. Dr. John Butt is the founder of Alberta's medical examiner system.
In a system like there is in British Columbia, it wants badly for medical direction.
A medical examiner system like in Alberta is run by doctors. Deaths are investigated by physicians, but that's not the case in BC, which uses a coroner's service. Coroners here don't have medical training, yet still make critical determinations on the cause of someone's death, including whether or not there should be an autopsy.
I would bet my bottom dollar that the issue here in British Columbia is to save money on autopsies. It's not the bottom line. But when you look at the way the system is organized, it defaults into that by the ineptitude or lack of education by the chief coroner in issues of medical cause.
For decades, the BC Coroner's Service has been run by lawyers, including former Chief Coroner Lisa Lapointe, who recently retired after 13 years. When asked if the province would consider her successor to be someone with a medical background, provincial leaders were non-committal.
I'm looking for someone, the best person for the job.
I'm sure that person will be looking at our practices here in the province to see whether there are areas for improvement or additional scrutiny, and that person will have my full support.
As for Sword, he's come to realize that there are many just like him who want more clarity on the deaths of their loved ones, but will likely never get it.
It just makes me question, why don't we have it? Why aren't we really trying to find out the source of these deaths? Why don't we invest the money?
Answers that, in the end, might not change what happened to his daughter, but could still provide some much-needed closure. Jon Hernandez, CBC News, Port Coquitlam.